Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us for this latest Rootwurks webinar, What is the Potential for Cannabis Beverages? My name is Ben Hartman. I'm the content manager here at Rootwurks, and I'll be your host for this webinar today. So if you've at all been paying attention to the cannabis industry in recent years, there's a lot of buzz and a lot of people getting buzzed around cannabis beverages. A lot of excitement, a lot to really like about cannabis beverages, but they've yet to really seize a really big part of the cannabis market, and we're going to look at the reasons why in this webinar here today. So we've got a couple experts here with us who are going to talk about kind of some of the issues that the cannabis beverages market faces and what they see as the potential for this part of the cannabis industry. So let's go ahead and introduce them. First off, we have Amanda Reiman, PhD, the Chief Knowledge Officer for the cannabis business intelligence firm New Frontier Data. She's also an internationally recognized cannabis expert and public health researcher and former in-house cannabis expert for the Drug Policy Alliance. Hey, Amanda, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Next up, we got Ben Kennedy. He is the co-founder and CEO of the cannabis beverages company Fable Libations. Kenny previously worked in strategic and business development for a lot of big companies, Fortune 500 companies like Johnson & Johnson and PepsiCo, and is in the cannabis beverage world and here with us today, more importantly, or just as importantly. How you doing, Ben?
Nice. Good, Ben. Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Lovely. So I thought maybe we start just kind of zoom out, and I could ask you, Amanda, to describe how big is this segment of the market today? And I guess how would you characterize sort of its place in the cannabis industry?
Absolutely. So I'll just start off by saying personally, I'm a huge fan of cannabis beverages. I'm not much of an alcohol drinker, and I've really kind of been looking for that product form that was going to be the true substitute for alcohol. We'll talk a little bit more about why cannabis beverages as a product form are such a good substitute for alcohol, especially as it relates to social consumption. But just a little bit of data first on the cannabis beverages market. So about 15% of cannabis consumers said that they've tried an infused beverage. So, pretty low when we look at the number of people that have used edibles and things like pre-rolls. Beverages are still pretty far down on the list, but they're a fairly new product form and they're not available anywhere. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. About 1% of consumers say that cannabis beverages are either their favorite or most frequent form of cannabis. So 15% of consumers have tried it, but only about 1% are saying this is my go-to product form. Now, only 26% of consumers say they have access to infused beverages overall. That's across market types. But even in adult use markets, only 34% of consumers say that they have access to cannabis beverages. So, part of this is knowledge about cannabis beverages. Part of it is the experience that beverages provide, but a huge part of this is actual access. So when we look at people that are using edibles, because a lot of times beverages are kind of put in the same category as edibles, 22% of edible consumers say that they commonly consume infused beverages. So among people who are choosing edibles as their favorite product form, we see a higher rate of adoption of beverages than people that are overall consumers. And infused beverages were the product that were the third most likely to be tried by potential non-consumers after edibles and topicals. So let me just say that again. When we look at current consumers, so people that are already cannabis consumers, flower is overwhelmingly the most popular choice. However, when you ask potential consumers, so people that are not yet consumers, but they're open to trying it, flower is way down on the list, and they're more likely to come into the market first with edibles, then with topicals, which are very rare among current consumers, and then beverages. So I think there's also a conversation to be had about the difference between current consumers and potential consumers when it comes to interest in cannabis beverages.
Yeah, I guess, Ben, I think part of it seems the issue is just kind of getting it in front of people and getting them to try these things. How do you get them and get beverages in front of people, and how do you kind of, I guess, how do you present the experience to people?
I think Amanda alluded to it, Ben. I think there's two very distinct markets here, addressable markets, and I think they're as different as as they can be. So in the existing cannabis marketplace, let's take California as an example. The consumer is typically looking for different things to somebody in the addressable market that may be going into a grocery store or a liquor store, searching for alcohol or alcohol alternative products. So I think that the retail environment is the first thing, and the hard truth is that beverages, despite green shoots in the recreational world, are out of place in the dispensary environment, and we can find dispensaries that are doing a yeoman's job. Sweet Flower do a great job in California of promoting and placing beverages, but the facts are what they are, and if you look at the buyers, if you look at the bud tenders, if you look at the spine of the retail environment in the regulated market, the chances are that beverages are a afterthought at best. So I think the retail environment in the regulated space is challenging, to say the least. I think if you look at the addressable market, if you look at big liquor stores, or even we're seeing hotels in Minnesota selling cannabis beverages, there's just a familiarization. People are walking into that retail location and they're expecting a drink, they're expecting to see drinks, they're open to exploring and educating themselves about drinks, and as simple as that is, it makes a world of difference when you're trying to launch or sell a new beverage. So I think retail environment is the first thing. I think then you get into education, Ben. How is this drink different? What's the functional benefits or the emotional benefits of a drink? And then how do you bring those benefits to life in what we have called the first moment of truth in the P&G world? When somebody walks into a store or they're looking at a shelf and they have 30 or 40 products staring back at them, what's the autopilot trigger to get them to pick up your beverage versus another beverage? And I think as an industry, we're still kind of figuring that out.
Mm-hmm. And I wonder also, we talk about this experience, and I think we spoke about this the other day. Is it trying to get people to have what's sort of like a nice, somewhat intoxicating beverage that's refreshing, or like the cannabis equivalent of like NyQuil? Like you're gonna take this to the dome, and it's got a couple 100 milligrams in there, and it's kind of moving more towards a liquid medicine as opposed to like a NyQuil or a cough syrup. So I wonder. It seems like there's a very easy kind of market to people who want to get a very concentrated, very very potent thing as quick as they can. But how do you kind of get people to more see it as like a thing that can be a way to kind of replace their happy hour drink or something like that? Is that kind of is that part of the, I guess, the dilemma here? Amanda, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you're right. So yes, there are kind of the concentrated elixirs that you find at the dispensary that are 100 milligrams for a very small container. People kind of take them like shots, right? But that's not necessarily the market that we're talking about when we talk about cannabis beverages. We are very social, and we drink our intoxicants. So whether that's alcohol or caffeine, we're used to kind of that ritual of sitting down, enjoying it, kind of savoring it. And I think that is a huge differentiator. And so, yes, when we have people that go into the dispensary and they want to buy a 100 milligram shot, they're likely going to take that shot. And these are people that are very heavy consumers. And, a 5 milligram beverage isn't going to touch their consciousness, right?
Right.
And so they're looking for a very different outcome and experience versus somebody that's like, what? I usually have a beer at night when I'm relaxing and watching TV. I want to have a cannabis beverage instead while I'm relaxing and watching TV. And in that way, we're really going after a whole different segment of the market. And it's a segment of the market that's less likely to be already a part of the market because they're less likely to have been involved in cannabis under prohibition. So we still have this kind of legacy of prohibition where you smoked your product because that's what you had access to. A lot of folks, even in legalization, are continuing that pattern of smoking their product. If they're not smoking their product, they're looking for an edible or a beverage that's going to give them the same level of intoxication that they get from smoking their product. But people that are newer to the market, that are just coming in and are curious about cannabis on its own or as a substitute, they're looking for a different type of experience. And whether that's sitting and enjoying a beverage and taking the time to savor it, or if they're looking for something that's more clandestine than smoking, so they're moving towards gummies because they can kind of take those everywhere, because you can't really take drinks everywhere, right? I can't take a beverage with me into a ball game, but I can take a gummy. So I think thinking about that, the motivation for consumption as well as the environment really plays into the adoption of the kind of the alcohol replacement beverage versus the shot of THC beverage.
Yeah, and I think it plays off the thing we were speaking of a while back, that it's sort of, can you see it as kind of an evolution of the cannabis market in general? Like, in other words, you're saying during Prohibition, you smoked weed because that's how it came, and you didn't have a lot of companies making these like beautifully crafted edibles, and you just don't have. And then maybe is it kind of a matter of, as the legal market grows more and more, and there's more options and there's more ways people can have like a really curated, personalized experience, then there's more and more of a place for beverages. Is that kind of what we think? Ben, is that what you think? Like, just looking at what's out there?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that the industry, and specifically the sector of cannabis beverage, is extremely immature, right? If we look at the maturation line, we're in the early innings, and I think a byproduct of being in the early innings is there's a lot of confusion, and I see a lot of whack-a-mole. And I think the temptation, or the subconscious kind of pitfall, is you forget about the consumer, right? You start to get high on your own product. Confirmation bias kicks in, all things to all people. And I see this all the time. And I'll give you a couple of kind of real examples. I was on a call earlier this week, and there was a founder of a beverage, and this gentleman was quite rightly excited about this beverage's potential to, displace alcohol. And then seconds later, he started talking about the frustration at not being able to put 4 or 5 health benefits on the can. And then it went into additional cannabinoids, and CBN and CBG, and on and on and on and on. And what hit me there is there's an absolute contradiction at play. There is a uneducated, curious consumer in their masses. They're all over the country. They're open to drinking less alcohol. But then we're making products that are asking them to decode so much, not just THC, but 4 or 5 additional acronyms. And then, is this alcohol replacement, or is this a health product? Because it sounded like there were health benefits, but I can't remember an alcohol product that claims to be beneficial to health. So I think there's a lack of focus behind use occasions, and that's just reflective of the immaturity of the sector. And in our case, we know what Fable stands for. Fable's a post 5 o'clock happy hour, golden hour cocktail. It's an alcohol replacement for a cocktail. So we have no right talking about 4 or 5 additional cannabinoids. Our consumers just getting their head around what 7 milligrams of THC means. Never mind the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth thing. It's Fable's a recreational product. I'm not going to tell anybody that there's any health benefits at all, but I believe it's healthier than alcohol. And that's it, period. No more, because it's a recreational product. We want Fable to take the edge off your day. We want Fable to help you relax, help you amplify social experiences, and not just Fable. Every 10 milligram social beverage out there, but that's a very definitive and clear swim lane. Juxtapose that with the 100 milligram drinks, it's an entirely different proposition. It's like Amanda said, I don't see an experience in consumption with a 100 milligram drink, and I don't think that's why they were designed. I think they are designed, whether people like this or not, more like a NyQuil. I think, Ben, you nailed it. They look like NyQuil. They're in the same kind of bottle as NyQuil. Yeah. And I think the primary functional benefit with the 100 milligram drinks, I believe, is get the THC in the system. You don't have to smoke it. Period. Right? That's what that does.
It's a delivery system. Yeah.
And that is so different to a cocktail or a seltzer. So I think what we've done, Ben, is we've categorized drinks. Right? Cannabis beverage, all things to all people. And there's clues there that we're confused as an industry, and we've got to get focused, and we've got to have brands determine what they are, speak to who they are for, and stay consistent with that if we're going to kind of evolve this sector. And that goes for absolutely everybody. And I've seen the power of the autopilot in action. And I was in a very well-known Hollywood lounge owned by a movie star, and it's a beautiful place in West Hollywood, and there's a bar, and I took the opportunity to sit at the bar one night and just watch how people consume cannabis beverages. And these two ladies came in at 9:45 at night, and they sat down at the bar and they scanned the shelf. And I know on that shelf there were cocktails, there were spirits, there were seltzers, there were 15 options. And they both picked a bright blue bottle of Jones soda, and I couldn't think of another instance where two people walk up to a bar at 10 o'clock at night and just buy a soda. The reason I believe that happened is because there was no onus on the consumer to think. They see blue soda, got it, soda. Know what it's going to taste like. Jones, know the brand. Okay, it's not going to do anything to me. Okay, 2 of them, please. And they sat there and they sipped on this bright blue soda. It's a micro example, Ben, of the confusion, both on the consumer side, the brand side, and the retail side, with regards to how you match the right product with the right consumer need. And I don't think the retail side is doing a lot to even help mitigate that problem. Do you have drinks? Yeah, they're over there in the fridge.
Yeah, over there. Well, we talk about a lot of this concept of kind of replacing the experience with like a late afternoon alcoholic beverage. And I wonder if the data supports it, or if it's, I know anecdotally it supports it, but Amanda, do you see that maybe like Gen Z or the younger consumers out there, do we see them as maybe having that potential because they're the ones who, we see as moving away from, the same drinking culture that maybe we grew up with, not having the same office drinking culture and things like that? Do we see them as maybe being a good place to invest some of this market in?
Oh, absolutely. So from our consumer survey, we see that about 16% of consumers say that one of the reasons they're using cannabis is as a direct replacement for alcohol. And that is higher among Gen Zs. So Gen Zs are drinking less alcohol at their age than millennials or my generation, Gen X, did at their age. We're definitely seeing a proliferation of sober bars, of non-alcoholic elixirs, and functional mushroom beverages. I think, there's kind of been this parallel track with cannabis beverages and functional mushroom beverages that we're starting to see kind of come together, right, as just a group of drinks that are alternatives to alcohol. And going back to what Ben said about the consumer knowledge base, this cannot be understated about how important this is to adoption. And I have a good friend who is in the cannabis space. She also her family owns a winery. They have a tasting room. She said, nobody comes into the tasting room and says, so tell me about wine. I've heard about it. I've never tried it. Like, how do you consume it? Do you drink it? how much should I drink? Like, people have this very basic understanding of alcohol, and we're taught that in high school, right? We're taught that 1 ounce of liquor equals 4 ounces of wine equals 12 ounces of beer. So we kind of come in with that basic knowledge that people in cannabis just do not have. And I think layered onto that, especially for newer consumers, is concern about overdose. Everybody has a story about themselves or someone they know that ate an edible and had a really scary experience. You don't know how long it's going to hit you. You don't know what the effect is going to be. I mean, that's one of the big reasons why people like inhalation, because they feel it right away. They can titrate their dose. So I think that there's a lot of education that has to happen, both about the difference between that NyQuil type 100 milligram product and the social elixir product, but also just in terms of how to use it safely and, what that looks like. And, with the nano emulsion technology, we're starting to see more fast acting beverages and edibles, but the average person doesn't understand that at all. They just know that, hey, I'm drinking this. I know people that have had really bad experiences doing this, and therefore I'm really nervous about what might happen to me. And I have nothing to compare it to. I have no background knowledge about consuming cannabis or consuming in this way. So if we want folks to adopt cannabis beverages as a product form, and I think they make so much sense in a lot of different avenues, alcohol and relaxation, we have to understand that they're coming in blind. I mean, they're coming in really with no information. And so, to Ben's point, having a beverage that's like 5 milligrams of this and 6 milligrams of this, and all of this information, they're not going to buy it. And the people that would buy it aren't interested in only having 10 milligrams of THC. That's not going to be enough for them. So there's definitely a mismatch between the products that are available and the level of consumer knowledge among that specific target audience.
And Ben, can I just build off of what Amanda said? Because I think there's one more aspect to this, which is this might come as no surprise, but THC and alcohol don't taste anything alike, right? Very, very different taste profiles. So as we talk about replacing alcohol, and then we put this ingredient in, and we call it a rum punch, or a margarita, or a mule, or a wine, or a beer, it's so far short of what that used to be, the alcoholized version of that I think we risk really underwhelming a consumer and putting them off the category as a whole. And we addressed this before we formulated Fable. At first we wanted to develop a spirit, and it's very clear that if you try to create just for example purposes, let's say rum. Let's say I said to you, Ben, we're going to make a cannabis-infused rum. Right? First thing you need to do is get rid of the rum, right? So you're dealing now with a tropical punch. And now you bring in the cannabis in. So now you've got a piney tropical punch. And now you might want to mask that with 2 or 3 other flavors. The net, and I really, really believe this, is we can't kid ourselves. I have seen cannabis beers launch, and I've seen everybody buy them once. Because the expectation, whether it's fair or not, is that beer will be as good as a Stella or your favorite beer. And guess what? It tastes a quarter as good. It's twice as expensive, twice as harder to get. And you might not like it, And then on top of that, to Amanda's point, there's a degree of uncertainty as to what it's going to do to you. So I think we have to be really, really honest with ourselves as to what drinks replace juice, what drinks replace tea, what drinks replace water, which brings to bear questions like, do you drink water to get drunk? Do you drink water to hydrate? Do you drink, scotch to socialize? Do you drink scotch to take the edge off the day? Do you drink milk to, there's a reason, a functional benefit, as we call it, with almost every beverage. And I don't think we're holding ourselves as an industry to account. I think the blister is easy, replace alcohol. But we need to figure out what that means, and to deliver a product that ends up being, 1/5 as good as the alcohol version is not going to get us where we need to be. And I think that's why you see the dilution of product development, that the cheapest and fastest way around that is to dilute the product, water, flavor, emulsion, bam. That's why we have 100 seltzers on the market, because it's easy. It's the path of least resistance. Well, the question I've asked investors is, hey, if I could give you an alternative to alcohol, drink it every night, you can get high, no hangover, less calories, would you drink that? And the answer is always unanimously, absolutely. And then I say, okay, what if for the rest of your life that had to be flavored water or a soda? Then would you drink it? And the answer is always something off, an F word with off. But there's a real key insight there. People still consume because there is an experience in consumption. Sauvignon Blanc is a great example. Nothing nicer than a cold glass of Sauvignon Blanc on a hot day after work. So I think everything Amanda said on the consumer is true, but on top of that, we have to hold ourselves to a higher standard. If we're really going to go to the market with this lofty aspirational goal of displacing alcohol, we can't do that and turn up to the party half baked, excuse the pun. It's got to be as good, if not better, than the alcohol version. That's the stakes, I think, and that's where I think the industry is miles off.
Yeah, so it's got to give people that sensation, if that's what they're trying to replace.
If that's what they're trying to replace, and to Amanda's point, I've met plenty of people that just want 100 milligram concoction. They don't care what's in it. It's interesting, Ben. Headset categorized the most popular beverage in Colorado, according to Headset, is a powdered sachet. It kind of says it all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, people want to be able to, let's say, if they want to replace that thing that they're used to, they still want to be able to take some of the things they enjoy from it. I mean, I remember you talking about someone trying to mimic that bite that alcoholic drinks have, which reminds me of sometimes like some of the issues some people have with vaping, things like that. You don't get that sensation of smoking necessarily with certain forms. And so definitely not easy to replicate that. But I guess beyond like the actual like branding and the product and all that, like what are some of these other issues, or I guess kind of problems or challenges with running a cannabis beverage company? Is it like, from compliance to regulation? I understand you can't use the same language that like a alcohol company can use, right? You can't say spirits or things like that. But what are some of those challenges you face?
Amanda, do you want me to take this one first? It's a very impressive fireplace you have, by the way.
Thank you.
Behind you there. I digress. I think, Ben, the first thing here to keep in mind is the business economics of building a consumer packaged goods company. And it's pretty straightforward. You lose money until you hit a tipping point, at which point economies of scale kick in and you make money, right? Every CPG on the planet has to follow that. If you then have to do that in an industry that doesn't allow you to build economies of scale because you have to build a supply chain in every single state, doesn't allow you to cross state lines with product, dealing with a retail environment that's predominantly buying on cost per milligram, dealing with consumers who have become trained that there's always a promotion on. The net is you cannot build a CPG business. You just it's impossible to do in that setting. Now you can build a business in a state and organically grow that over the next 10, 15 years. The challenge is most companies have raised money to be able to do this, and with money comes expectations, and expectations drives roadmaps, and on and on and on. So I think from a fundamental business standpoint, which is based on margins, economies of scale, revenue, efficiency, SOPs, the regulated space does not offer any of that for the beverage industry. Now, this is why we're seeing a migration to the hemp space, because the hemp space allows, first and foremost, centralized manufacturing, which means that we can make 100,000 units a run versus 10,000 units a run. We can activate a DTC infrastructure that allows us to, more or less deliver to somebody's home wherever they are. You can work with companies to start building sustainable margins. You can advertise, Ben. You can advertise on channels that otherwise you couldn't advertise on. So for me, the economic landscape as it is today in the regulated space is literally impossible, and that's before the cost of acquisition considerations that Amanda's alluded to, the education, the activation at retail, driving the connected commerce ecosystem, whether that's social commerce or product pages on marketplaces or CRM. All this costs money and has to deliver an ROI. And that ROI looks a damn sight more achievable when you're looking at the US versus when you're trying to build with partners in this state, and then you're starting again in this state, and you're starting again in this state. So that would be my, without rambling, Ben, I think that's the reality. But I think it's a very, very interesting time because it ultimately, time will tell if hemp holds muster, stands the test of time. But at this point, I know 10 CEOs of beverage brands that have said if hemp falls, we're done, because I think that means this is a red herring.
Yeah, I think one aspect of it I was thinking in terms of the market, and I think Amanda, you may shine some light on this. Like, do we see maybe the spread of more? I mean, obviously there need to be things written in the codes that would allow it and all that. But if there's more cannabis consumption lounges around, and then people can then drink beverages in them, now they'll have to want to go to a specific spot for that as opposed to like their regular bar. But do you think that could be something that could kind of change that segment across the board?
I think it helps, but it doesn't solve. So, when we talk about like the savoring experience with alcohol and wanting to replicate that with cannabis, a lot of that happens in social spaces. So people going to bars, people going to restaurants, sitting around with friends, sipping their beverage. I mean, that's kind of commonly how it's used, and not just alcohol, but caffeine as well. When we talk to cannabis consumers, the majority, and we ask them, what do you do after you consume cannabis? The majority of them stay home and watch Netflix. So right now, there isn't this culture around going out with cannabis, unless, you're a younger person, you go to a lot of concerts and festivals and things like that. So I think that having social consumption lounges is a good start, and it's very important. I mean, that's what a bar is. It's a social consumption lounge for alcohol. So having spaces where people can go and consume cannabis, hang out, take time, play games, kind of do all of those things is a huge part of adoption of cannabis beverages. However, if we don't have a situation where people can go to one place and decide whether they're going to have alcohol or THC or caffeine, it's still going to keep people separate. And it's going to be like, all right, well, tonight I want to have a cannabis beverage and my friend wants to drink alcohol. We can't go to the same place and enjoy those beverages together. And until that happens, it's still going to make people choose, right? So do you want to go to a cannabis consumption place tonight or an alcohol consumption place? And I think that is going to keep cannabis beverages from fully meeting the mainstream, because if I'm going out with friends to a bar and they're going to serve alcohol and I don't want to drink, I'm not going to have a cannabis beverage and shotgun it in the car before I go into the bar. I'm going to bring gummies with me, and I'm going to keep them in my purse, and I'm going to pop a gummy in the bar, and no one's going to know what I'm doing. And that is the product form that's going to most meet the need for me to consume cannabis in a place where alcohol is being served. So unless and until we have places where you can just as easily choose THC as you can alcohol, and those people can hang out together and socialize together and consume together, it's still really going to marginalize cannabis consumers to these very cannabis specific places. And if there's no social consumption, then we're really asking them to buy beverages, take them home to consume. And, then it kind of becomes, what's the preference? And, like Ben was saying, we really haven't gotten to a point where people that are bourbon drinkers, for example, can find a cannabis beverage that's going to satisfy what they get from that bourbon in terms of taste and experience.
Yeah, well, this is probably a good opportunity to introduce you all to my new bed and breakfast I'm opening. No, I think it did kind of made me think a little bit. Like that was kind of the thing always when you go to Amsterdam. Coffee shops are a lot of fun, but if you just want to buy it and go back to your hotel room, how long are you gonna hang out at the coffee shop? And what if you want a beer? And also sell beer. What if you want to just go sit in a pub in Amsterdam and hang out and drink and also smoke? And then you can't. So it's sort of like the coffee shop's great if you just want to sit around in a place with a bunch of strangers and get high. But if you don't, then it's kind of just a dispensary. So I think if there was a way to combine, well, all of those outside of your own living room, people may be on board. But it's so individual. Also, you want to say something?
No, I'm laughing because it takes me back to my college Amsterdam trips, and you're absolutely right. One of the four didn't consume at all, wanted to be in bars. We spent most of the day going between, lounge and patisserie, all day. He'd get angry. So you're absolutely right. No, I was just going to add, I do believe in lounges. Our number one account in California is a lounge, 420 Bank in Palm Springs. The angst I feel is on behalf of lounge operators, because I think the best lounge experiences, if you think about life, and this might be a business lounge, it might be a nightclub, it could be a lounge in a 5-star resort, but they are all pleasant environments, and due to no fault of lounge operators, it's because of prohibitive laws. These lounges can't operate to their full potential. And an example I'll give you is 420 Bank, God bless them, are doing everything right. They're not allowed to serve food. So they're operating a lounge where the revenue they could generate by serving food is not allowed. You can bring a pizza in. So I hope that these lounges I hope that there's common sense that prevails that allows these lounges to be what they truly can be, regardless of consumption. I think they have to get foundational stuff down first to include how are they going to make money. One thing I see with lounges are people, you can spend 4 hours in a lounge and smoke one joint. That is not a sustainable business model. So we have to, as these lounges come online, Ben, I hope that they are given every opportunity to succeed. And it comes down to what we all see every day in this space. There is an enormous lack of common sense. And I think death by 1,000 cuts is really, really coming home to roost now. And things have to change. California being example number one with the black market. It is cheaper to buy from the black market than to go into a licensed store who are doing everything by the book, and they're doing everything the way they've been told to do. But it's $30 more than buying off your mate down the street. So common sense has to catch up pretty quickly here, and we all hope New York would learn from these mistakes, and here we are. So
yeah, definitely. Well, they got to serve food. I mean, I don't know. That's it. If possible.
They do. It's like having a bar that can't serve. It's like having a restaurant that can't serve alcohol. It's the inverse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and I mean, being able to serve food is also a harm reduction measure, right? So, people being able to eat while they're consuming cannabis is going to reduce the likelihood of overdose or of having a negative experience. But a lot of these rules are born out of reefer madness, right? So the concern that if you serve food, people are going to hang out longer, which means they're going to consume more cannabis. So we're still kind of dealing with these very antiquated ideas about what it means to be a cannabis consumer in the modern world. And I think that that's one reason why they really silo the cannabis. Like, the store can only sell cannabis. This lounge, you can only consume cannabis. It can't be available anywhere else. When the reality is that most cannabis consumers also consume alcohol, and they certainly consume food. So why aren't we kind of bringing this into the social sphere rather than kind of marginalizing it off to the side, which really at the end of the day makes the whole thing less safe for everyone?
And then the woods in West Hollywood, just to back up what Amanda said, they have this beautiful outdoor space, right? That's a lounge. Couldn't be designed any better. Absolutely beautiful space. But you can't consume in that space because it's outdoor, and there's local neighborhood restrictions on odor, on things like that. So you go into this beautiful outdoor space with a parrot in the tree and a pond in the corner and this beautiful bar. But if you and I wanted to light a joint, we have to go into a plastic igloo in the corner of the outdoor space because of local neighborhood bylaws.
Yeah.
So I see lounges trying so hard. I just hope we give them every opportunity, because this is not an easy business model, especially if you take the revenue that food would deliver away. You're left with very little. You'll sell an awful lot of edibles to make that work.
Yeah, otherwise I guess it's like the booth they used to have at the airport where you could smoke cigarettes.
Perfect point. Yeah.
It's just very it's very practical. It's not exactly a great user experience, to say the least, but I think we've all been there. So I guess, what would you say, I guess I would like to ask both of you, what would be, I guess, the biggest, if there was if it's easy, it can be simplified, like the biggest thing that can be done to make cannabis beverages get a bigger piece of the market?
Well, I would say allow them to be integrated with other products that people consume socially for intoxication purposes. If we want people to adopt cannabis beverages, we have to make them available in places where people go to consume intoxicants in a social manner. So coffee shops, bars, lounges, if those are places that are in the business of selling people potentially intoxicating substances and giving them a safe space in order to consume those substances, cannabis should be part of that, because it isn't the person that's frequenting the dispensary who's interested in the cannabis beverages. They're going to buy the shot. It's the person that's interested in cannabis, but maybe doesn't feel comfortable going to a dispensary, or, isn't really ready to kind of commit to that level of involvement in the culture. But if they were to go to an alcohol bar and they had a choice at the bar and someone said, you can have a beer or you could have a cannabis seltzer, like giving them that option in the moment is how you're going to get newer consumers and people that aren't necessarily associated with the culture to say, I think I'll try a cannabis beverage because I don't want to be hungover tomorrow. And that is really how you're going to get mass adoption.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Ben?
I think Amanda's absolutely nailed it. The only thing I'd add is, I do believe more and more, and we've operated in the regulated space now for a couple of years, but I do believe more and more that if beverages are going to do all they can for the cannabis world, if beverages are going to do all we can to reduce the stigma, then beverage as a sector has to align with alcohol, to include the infrastructure of alcohol, where it's sold, how it's sold, who's selling it, how we're activating it in store. I think it has to go that way to help the greater charge around cannabis as a whole, because I think to Amanda's point, familiarization and normalization is key. And we have normalized cannabis through beverages, but we're still in a unfamiliar environment on the retail side, and that just cannot sustain itself. So I would say familiarization. And then, as I've always said to you, Ben, I've had too many people tell me that they won't try Fable because they think drinks are disgusting, which is really frustrating.
Thanks.
But there's truth in that, so I would like to see better drinks. I would like to see less seltzer waters. I think it's lazy at this point in time to launch a seltzer water. I think it's misguided. But I want to be fair, we're bound by structure, we can't use alcohol, so you don't get those characteristics of an alcoholic drink. There are too many manufacturers that just want to pump out sugared water with emulsion, right? So it's not, when I say this, it's not the founder's fault. It's best intentions, but I think we have to do better. We have to innovate. We have to take longer to address the nuances of a good drink, to include bite, viscosity, mouthfeel. Fable was designed to be sipped because we wanted somebody to feel the effect. If you slam a drink, you sat there going, right? If you drink a drink over 20 minutes, you're going to start to feel it. So there's such a level of nuance that we could bring to this industry that we're currently not bringing. So innovation, familiarization of retail environment would be my two things.
That's great. Well, it's interesting. I mean, it's not an exact comparison, but I was thinking when you talk about how it can't replace or accompany like the alcohol experience unless it kind of has that similar sort of feeling, the bite and all that. And it's quite different, but it makes you think of when they, these meat alternatives, if it actually gives you that same mouthfeel and that flavor and that sensation, because it's not just a meat delivery system. It's also an experience. So if you can actually get that experience somewhat, then people might, keep coming back. And I think they do. Again, it's still not an alcohol, it's still not a beer, but
I think it's a brilliant example that you've just made. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah. Nobody's going to eat a corned beef burger if it tastes like cardboard.
Right. Or probably why it's harder with to make like a, synthetic like ribs or something, because how do you mimic that sensation? But like beef or things like that are ground beef, that's a little easier. But that's our next webinar. No, just kidding. So I guess, and this is I know we got to wrap it up here in a few, but if we could give a little forecast or predict the future, I mean, what do y'all think? Let's say 5, maybe 10 years from now, is it going to be a much bigger part of the market? Cannabis beverages?
I think so. I think it's in its nascent stage. And, because consumers don't have the knowledge, it takes longer for adoption to happen. But I think this is really going to be dependent on a couple things. One is where it's distributed and where you can purchase it and whether or not that's available along mainstream intoxicants, I think is going to be a really big piece of that. And then a lot of it is just looking at what consumer behavior is going to be like 5 or 10 years from now. We talked about the Gen Zs as the youngest generation being less interested in alcohol. So I could see that a continuing trend. If that is the case, there's obviously a much bigger opportunity than if people start to go back to using alcohol. And then I also think it's going to be about getting non-consumers to adopt cannabis, because current consumers are still pretty much stuck on flower. But when you ask new consumers or potential consumers, they're all about manufactured products. So, New Frontier has a report coming out next month on growing the pie. So looking at people that are consumers but are not currently using the regulated market and looking at potential consumers and how they differ from current consumers. So I think rather than trying to just get all regular current consumers to adopt beverages, we have to go out beyond the current consumer base, and we have to look at people that are potential consumers, people that are consumers but not using the regulated market, and figure out how we bring them in. Because especially for those potential consumers, beverages is a really great entree into the cannabis ecosystem because it's a consumption method they're familiar with. And because you can titrate your dose and you can do low dose, and it is something that replaces a behavior that they're already familiar with doing, they really are the lowest hanging fruit, but they're not going to come in unless they feel safe and unless they feel educated about what they're consuming and how it's going to make them feel.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we can all drink to that, right? Well, I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I think I like talking about cannabis beverages. I like drinking them. I think I think the potential is definitely there, and they're a lot of fun. And I think there's all different types of consumers who can enjoy them in their own different way. And I hope, the next time we all meet up, one, that it's not 5 years from now, but if it is, that they're in a much bigger share of the market. So I guess before we get out, if anybody wants to see what Amanda and Benjamin and Ben are working on here, here's where you can just check out Fable Libations or go check out New Frontier Data. A lot of really interesting research, all types of reports about cannabis there. You can also, on Fable Libations website, pick up a case for, football game, whatever your heart desires. Definitely check out both of them. And we're extremely happy that we got to have you all on there. And if you'd like to, on here, and if you'd like to learn more about us, come check us out at rootwurks.com. You can read all about learning experience platform and what we do for cannabis education, training, and compliance. We've also got a lot of new products coming down the wire here in the next coming months, so definitely stay tuned, and we'll see you on the next webinar. And thanks, guys. This was awesome.
Thanks for
Thanks,
having
Ben.
me.
And cheers, obviously.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah, I'll see
Take
y'all.
care.
Bye, guys.